I'm very happy that our first votes, not only of this session, but of this decade, are going to be focused on supporting small businesses. You know, in America, we tend to speak about small businesses with a sense of reverence that I think is absent in other countries, and there's good reason for that. So many of the great companies in this nation started out as small businesses. Some of the greatest companies in America today are small businesses. We also have 60 million individuals, just under that number, that are employed by over 30 million small businesses throughout the country. And the Small Business Administration can play a very important role in our success and in the success of these businesses by providing entrepreneurs and firms with technical assistance and with access to capital. And so it's critically important for the country. So today, as we consider the nomination of Jovita Carranza to serve as the SBA administrator, I thought it was an important point to make, and some additional points I'd like to make. First of all, the position of administrator is really crucial to ensuring that the agency is functioning well and is successful. It's also important that the administrator be someone who is open to and supportive of the need to modernize the Small Business Administration and its many programs. You know, as we move into this new decade, it's really important that the agency evolve to meet the unique and special needs of the entrepreneurs of today at a time in which we have ever-changing and increasing global and business climate adjustments that are occurring. I think sometimes we forget that businesses today face a very different environment than we saw 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so, as we are aware of these changes, it's important on policymakers who have an obligation to identify the goals that achieve our national interests and then that provide for our national defense, that create good jobs for American workers, and then that we organize the laws that we propose and the reforms that we propose around those important items of national interest and how to achieve furthering them. Now, the last time the Small Business Administration was fully reauthorized was 20 years ago, in the year 2000, when just 42% of households, for example, in 2000 had internet access. Nearly everyone was still using dial-up phones for access. It would be another 6 years before the iPhone even existed. And Americans back in 2000 bought fewer than 10,000 hybrid electric cars. That was just in 2000 to 2020. Those are the changes that have undergone. And that was the last time the SBA was reauthorized. It also happens to be the year, by the way, when China became a member of the World Trade Organization. And I say that because today American small businesses, if you think our big businesses face unfair competition, imagine the unprecedented threat in competing against the Chinese government and its Communist Party and its systematic industrial espionage and coercion and large-scale subsidies for their own industries and its sweeping obstruction of market access to its own country. The challenges are extraordinary. And they require resources that allow our small business sector to compete against these conditions and to operate dynamically, to grow, to be innovative, to be creative. Small businesses need access to services and programs that better position them to support not just our nation's competitiveness on an international scale, but particularly with regards to Beijing's continued economic aggression towards our nation. Now, just as the SBA was critical in building the technologies and helping to spur the creation of the technologies that allowed us to be successful both in the space race and ultimately in the Cold War, I believe the SBA can play an important role in our efforts to compete with Chinese economic hostility. And in that regard, it's important to note that the status quo is just not enough. We need an agency that incorporates new and creative programs, that focuses on spurring investment, supporting advanced manufacturing, promoting innovation, expanding our export opportunities. And it's important to note, as I said earlier, with regard to the SBA's role during the space race and the Cold War, that innovation breakthroughs that we have often seen in our history have often been contingent on private-public collaboration, especially in the space program, that also happen to have commercial application, but also further our national security. Now, small businesses and startups have always historically been essential to developing the technologies and the commercialization of products that often come out of these partnerships. But unlike what we see in Silicon Valley, startups that venture capital firms tend to gravitate towards over there, these technologies, the ones that are in our national interest that I just spoke about, those require significant time and resources to finance. So on the committee, the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, we're going to continue to work towards a comprehensive reauthorization of the Small Business Act and the Small Business Investment Act to achieve these ends that I've just outlined. But the leadership and the guidance of a forward-thinking SBA administrator is going to be essential, not just to get it passed, but to make sure this modernization works. So, as the chairman of the committee, I'm very eager to see that the position of administrator be filled. President Trump nominated Ms. Carranza to serve in this critical role back in August of last year. She has a long and successful career, spending many years in both the private sector and government service. She started her career at UPS. After 29 years, she retired from there as the Vice President of Air Operations. Then she was nominated by President George W. Bush and was confirmed by this body, the Senate, to serve as the SBA's Deputy Administrator back in 2006. She served there for 2 years, went back into the private sector until returning in June of 2017 when President Trump named her Treasurer of the United States. Last month, the committee, the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, we held a hearing to consider this nomination, and we voted favorably to report her nomination to the Senate floor. And in that hearing, Ms. Carranza made commitments to working with Congress, to working with each of us on the issues, the pressing issues that are facing the SBA and the programs. She assured us, myself, the ranking member, Senator Cardin, and others, members of the committee, that she would address the management challenges in the Office of Investment and Innovation to ensure the integrity of its programs. But most important, that she would appear before the committee after her confirmation to provide an update on how she's addressing those challenges. She's committed to do other things that are important, assessing the far-reaching rule governing the agency's critical access to capital programs so that it's not restricting access to capital for small businesses, to be communicative and transparent with us on the subsidy models and calculations that they're using for the federal credit programs, to fill the backlog of staff that's needed to properly run the SBA's innovation programs, to ensure that federal grant dollars are being properly used, the dollars especially associated with the entrepreneurial development programs, to modernize the agency's disaster loan programs and establish better internal controls to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. She committed to expeditiously establish a women-owned small business certification program and to provide responses to Congress on several of our past communications to the agency outlining proposals to aid small businesses against cyber threats, which is a critical threat facing many of our small businesses in this country today. So in our business meeting that we had after the hearing, we considered her nomination. I was pleased to see that the overwhelming majority of our members on both sides of the aisle, including the ranking member, supported sending the nomination here to the full Senate because there's a lot of work to be done, but restoring and expanding the SBA's historic legacy of assisting businesses and meeting the international challenges at hand are very important, very crucial. And so I look forward to working with Ms. Carranza to modernize our existing programs, to meet the challenges that we have before us, and working towards solutions that ensure that small businesses have access to the resources they need to start, to grow, and to empower our nation at large. And so I urge all of my colleagues to support this nomination here. We'll have a vote in a few minutes. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.